difficulty in video games, inciting rage and inducing adult tantrums in millions daily. From banshee wails to holes in the wall. Excuses varying from bullshit animations, bad devs, and cheaters online, all blamed for your skill issue. Many developers take the lazy route to challenge in games. The dreaded bullet sponge, the cement wall, the enemy in a realistic shooter that can take a 12-gauge shot directly to the chest point blank and walk it off like it was nothing. Or a little demon guy. The equivalent of a hell rat, who can take a 308 sniper shot to the dome without so much as flinching. I want to talk about a few ways that developers can, and have, made their games more difficult without making their enemies 100% accurate or take 3 entire magazines to kill. To start off, I'm going to go the obvious route and talk about the Souls-like method. There are a few techniques here, but I'm going to cover them all as one for the sake of brevity. The way that the Souls games, despite their reputation for difficulty, keep themselves easily conquerable is through consistency. Yes, the first time you encounter an enemy in those games, they're more than likely to take your ass to Pound Town, reducing your digital avatar and your fragile ego into a paste. But alongside this, there's another facet. Every enemy has an opening. It has a tell or a weakness that you can exploit. Some are easier to utilize than others. For example, the slime guys in the Dark Souls games aren't an inherently difficult enemy, but they're resistant to slash damage and can be kind of tedious. Unless you embrace your inner pyromaniac. Then they are simple and easy. There are a lot of examples of this in games, but I think a really good one is how in Elden Ring, Radon is super weak to Scarlet Rot. This is the kind of weakness that is baked into the game. If you're paying attention on the lead up to the fight, it's mentioned in passing that he was defeated by Scarlet Rot in the past. So that means that this fight that a ton of people have a lot of difficulty with is made much easier by shooting him with a couple poison-tipped arrows. There are so many examples of this in the Souls games. Melania is weak to bleed. Gwyn is weak to parrying. But everything gets their ass absolutely obliterated by this dude. What's cool about this kind of challenge, though, is that it rewards players for attentiveness and patience. Many of the fights in the Souls games are difficult, but they don't have to be, either through taking advantage of thematic weaknesses or through utilizing the rhythm of the game to beat them. This leads me into the next form of difficulty I wanted to talk about, the teaching effect. This is the backbone of a lot of games that do it well, but I would like to specifically talk about Sekiro and Thumper. I wanted to use Thumper because it's a fantastic and extremely visible example of this technique at work. Thumper is a rhythm game that increases the difficulty by increasing the BPM. Then, as you progress through the game, along with the general speed increase and the visibility decrease, they are slowly requiring you to master a specific skill one at a time. This method of teaching someone your game through the gameplay is simple in concept but difficult in execution. If you drop every complicated mechanic on someone's shoulders right from the get-go, like many RPGs do, they're going to quickly get overwhelmed. Sekiro and Thumper, my examples, avoid this issue by requiring that you demonstrate mastery of a previous skill before adding or teaching you another. In Thumper or other rhythm games, this is a lot more visible than it is in action-oriented games. Teach one thing, do more of one thing, show mastery of one thing, here's new thing, rinse and repeat. This is something that action-oriented games that don't add a ton of mechanics throughout the duration of the game do to make the difficulty more manageable. For example, in Sekiro, the first thing the game teaches you is to sneak. The easiest way to kill an enemy, everything is a one-shot right at the beginning. Then, after it teaches you how to sneak, all of the first enemies are really telegraphed and easy to parry. Then it slowly introduces you to slightly less telegraphed attacks before the first difficult enemy who shows you unblockable attacks, forcing you to start moving and dodging during a fight. The game does this with many different aspects of combat throughout each zone, and by the end of the game, enemies that were difficult at the start are so easy it's a joke. Not necessarily because you have more health, but because you're so much better at the game now.
Finally, you get to rain down righteous justice. Suffer for the pain you have wrought, you insignificant insect.
Then there is the rhythm that's used to help in boss fights, essentially giving the middle finger to anybody who plays with their own music. I think a great example of this is the dancer in Dark Souls 3. A lot of people had difficulty with this fight. They thought that the attack patterns were erratic. The reason for this, however, is something that was surprisingly simple. The score for that fight, the score that the boss follows with its attack pattern, isn't in 4/4 time, which is what everybody's used to. It's actually in 7/4 time. Now, this is not looking at beats per minute, just tempo. The thing is, very little music has 7/4 timing. And so by having the tempo be different in this way, it makes the fight more difficult, but still predictable. Just for reference, another 7/4 time song is the theme for Mass Effect 1. The next method of adding difficulty that I want to talk about is a medal system. A lot of games use this, a lot of like fighter combo beat 'em up games like Bayonetta and oh my god, what is the one with fucking Dante? The one with Dante, the one with Dante, the one with Dante. So anime. Devil May Cry. But I'm gonna talk about Neon White for this one. This game is so fun. And although it's not difficult on paper, it is difficult in perfection. This game ranks your execution of every level based on time. This means that although you could get a bronze medal on every level and scrape by, you can make the game difficult for yourself by embracing your inner overachiever. In other words, getting the highest grades so that your parents don't call you a failure for not living up to their mythic standards.
Oh, you didn't get red platinum? Honestly disappointed. Why do we even put in so much effort for you to succeed if you're just gonna settle for mediocrity?
Are you really gonna move on to the next level? Saw how you lost a second on that ledge there. I mean, you know you can do better.
Surely you think you can do better than that. My father would have never been as lenient as I have with this kind of fuck up.
Maybe we were too soft with you.
But I've been on this level for an hour.
That's what we thought.
This is a fantastic way to create difficulty, though. It lets the players choose how much pain they're willing to inflict on themselves. They can be cowards and move on after completing the level on bronze every time, or they can self-flagellate, settling for nothing but the world's best. The campaign of the game balances these two by requiring that you at least get higher than bronze on a few levels before allowing you to proceed to the next section of the game. I just want to say that there are some downsides to this style, however. When someone is getting ranked on a whole section of a game, it has to be easy for them to replay it. Otherwise, they're not going to be inclined to do so. So for this reason, they need a seamless restart, and it needs to not be too long of a section. If I have to wait through a long-ass loading screen just to get a single letter higher of a rank on a single level, I'm just not going to do it. Most people are not that patient. This is something that Celeste does really well. It makes death really easy to get over. When you die, it restarts instantly. There's very little time lost. Sure, it's frustrating, but the sections are pretty short. So when you fail a room, it doesn't feel like you lost a ton of time. That way, if you spend 30 minutes trying to complete a single room, you're less likely to put a hole in your monitor and more likely to pop off. The final kind of difficulty that I'm going to talk about is the kind that a lot of roguelikes use. Knowledge of items and upgrades. Many of this style of game, like Hades, Risk of Rain 2, Vampire Survivors, and to a lesser extent Enter the Gungeon, create difficulty through challenging gameplay, but give you an out. If you know how the items work together, it makes the game a lot easier. Some buff or item combos in these games trivialize what was once a painful slog. Items in these games are all luck, you say? You're just saying the game's easier when you're lucky? To an extent, yes, but there is more intentionality than simple luck.
But chicken, you're just saying if you're lucky, the game's easier.
Yeah. Roll dice better, loser. Skill issue. This message was brought to you by the American Casino Association. Please gamble irresponsibly. We took your money because you're bad. Get over it. In all seriousness, this is something that's a lot easier to accomplish in some games than others. Some roguelikes rely a lot more heavily on luck, but knowing or understanding what works still helps because you can choose certain items. Some games, though, rely on this knowledge to make them significantly easier. Hades, for example, if you focus on 2 gods specifically Athena and Ares, it makes it so that you just deflect projectiles for playing how you would normally play. Risk of Rain gives you enough choices through chest types, multi-shops, printers, that if you know how items work with certain characters, you can almost always get a build that works for you, as long as you don't have like the worst luck possible, which can happen. Still a skill issue though. This type of difficulty scaling is a lot more attainable than it appears at first, because although other games teach you intentionally, you kind of just absorb this through osmosis. You find what items you like, what combos work for you through trial and error. Then eventually, after a few hours of gameplay, you're suddenly getting further and further into each consecutive run. Then, after 400 hours, you're ready to give a master's level dissertation to your drunk friend about how the game isn't really that difficult if you know how the items work. I'm telling you, man, the game isn't really that hard. All you have to do is make sure that you get the clown nose whenever you see it, because it gives you laugh counters. Then always pick the middle finger mittens, because they increase the building of counter items by 1 per proc. Then if you're lucky, you'll get the Dungeon Master Scream, which really just makes the whole game trivial, because you'll automatically reroll any dice rolls that you fail. So if you have all 3, you have a 27.3% chance to get a laugh on kill, increasing your chuckle meter, which on hit, the clown nose will deal damage in an increased AoE based on acquired chuckles. But there's the gun. I'm just gonna pick the gun. Now, there are other ways that games create difficulty that I'm not gonna delve into, like puzzle-style combat with elemental reactions, or rock, paper, scissors style combat with shields or weaknesses and resistances, like in Destiny or Pokemon. And there are definitely other unique ways of creating challenge that I just didn't think of or haven't experienced. But these are just some of the major contenders that came to mind when I was thinking about this concept. Obviously, as well, I am not a game developer. It's a lot easier for you to say that something's bad for these reasons than it is for you to do it. I don't have the technical expertise to really understand how to make these things work outside of a thematic or broad perspective. I can talk about how games can be better all day, but I don't have the skill set to implement those changes, so it doesn't really make that big of a difference. Anyway, thanks for watching. Peace.